Hello everyone, this is Homer White, back with the second video that goes along with the Chapter 2 Data Analysis Report assignment. This video addresses how we produce that report. I want to say something about the workflow that you might follow when you are producing a data analysis report using RStudio and R Markdown. And I'd like to show you a couple of things about R Markdown that will go along with what you've already been learning about R Markdown from the class. So I'm going to assume that the example assignment for this report is the actual assignment, and I'm going to pretend to build it up step by step, although in a very abbreviated and quick way for this video. So let's pretend that I have taken from the Math 111 Common Source folder the assignment itself. Here it's called the DAR Chapter 2 Actual Assignment.RMD, and I'm going to begin to turn it into my actual report. My first order of business, though, is to make sure that I save it into my Submit folder so that the data report can be collected at the due date. So we'll say File, Save As. Since I have just grabbed that assignment from the Common Source folder, the dialog box is currently pointed at the Common Source folder. I need to be pointing home in order to save into my Submit folder. So I go to the ellipses, follow the directions, entering twiddles for home. Now all of a sudden I'm pointed home. I go to my Submit folder, open it up. I'm ready to save the assignment, but I need to save it with the correct naming format. So remember, we're going to put in our username. So I'm going to put hwhite0 instead of the word actual. It's very important to keep the DAR Chapter 2 and then the underscore at the beginning so that the computer can recognize what assignment this is and put it in the right place when it collects the assignment at the due date. Now we'll save the assignment. At this point, you might want to head back to your Files pane. You're pointed back in the Common folder. You probably should be looking back home. So again, follow the directions to go back home. And just to make super sure, look inside your Submit folder. Is the assignment there? Yes, it is. DAR Chapter 2 hwhite0.R Looks good. Now to the assignment itself. We need to make sure that we have a proper title, author, and date. You may want to decide on the title and date later, but at some point you'll have to provide your own. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Having filled in the front matter correctly, I look over the assignment and I begin to do the substantive work. I become familiar with the dataset napkins. I familiarize myself with the research question. And then I launch into the all-important variable analysis, following now the directions in the methods section. Decide what methods are appropriate for this particular research question. And then I'm going to think about generating the results. Once you've decided on your methods and you want to produce some results, it's a good idea to try out your code on a separate R script, similar to one that you might use to keep your notes. I have an R script open here called My Scratch Work. As you can see, I've already been working on this assignment. I decided that density plots, box and whisker plots, and histograms might be a good way to look at the research question graphically, and apparently I tried out all three. I decided that I liked histograms best for this particular data, and so I fiddled around with some of the arguments such as layout and width, and I also gave good titles to the graph itself and to the x-axis so that the graph would look as good as possible in my final report. I'm going to put that in the final report at some point, but I need to make sure that the code works. Let me just see. I'm going to select and run the code. Yes, over in the plot window, things look fine. When that goes into the report, it should generate good things. Back to the report itself. I have some directions about methods. I have done my variable analysis, decided what I'm going to do, and I think things are going to work out all right. But I need to write up that part of the report. I'll begin typing. Okay, I finished typing up my methods section. Notice that I never deleted the directions that appeared between these little brackets. That's because they'll never show up in the knitted version of the document itself, so there's no harm in keeping them around. I might want to know how things are going to turn out. What I should do is knit my document up. The quickest way is to knit it up into an HTML. So finding HTML under the Knit button, see how things are shaping up. Yes, the title, the author, and the date look good. My section headings look good. And I've got some things under methods. You might be curious, how did I get that boldface for the variable sex in napkins? How did I get these bulleted items? Let's head back into the R Markdown document to see. If you'd like to put something in boldface, for example, the word sex here, you just surround it with pairs of stars. If you would like to have bulleted items, then the pattern is this. For your first bullet item, begin with a star, then one space, and then the material that you would like to bullet. The second bulleted item comes right after it on the next line. Again, one star, then a space, and then the material that you would wish to bullet. Continuing on now to the results. I need to produce both my graphical and my numerical results. The graphical results appear to come in a separate subsection called Graphical Results. Notice the directions about having good title and labeling your axes and so on, and discussing the results of your graph in terms of your research question. Well, how shall I fill in? I think I'll begin by filling in the code. In order to do this, I'm going to have to insert my own code chunk and then put the right code for my histogram inside of that chunk. If you go to the Chunks button, you'll see that you have an option to insert a chunk. You may want to memorize the keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-I. So with the cursor where I'd like to insert the chunk, Control-Alt-I. Now I put the cursor inside the chunk. I'm ready to either type code in there or to copy and paste code from my scratch work. I'll head to my scratch work. I'll copy and paste the code for histogram that I already know works. Copy. Head back to the assignment. Make sure the cursor's in the right place. Control-V. Paste. Of course, it's a good idea to introduce any graph that you show to the reader before you show them the graph. And of course, you need your discussion afterwards. So I'm going to begin to type in that text. All right, I've typed in my text. Let's see how it's looking. I'll knit it up again. It's a good idea to knit frequently. That's a way of ensuring that your code is correct if the knitting completes, and the document has the format that you would like. Checking the document, I see not only the code, but the graph itself. That's the great thing about R Markdown. You're never going to have to copy and paste in results separately. It's automatically produced by the machine when it sees and reads your code. Here's the discussion after it. Things look okay. In a similar way, we can put numerical results. I'm going to start typing. As you can see, I have inserted a code chunk for favstats, and I have a discussion about what favstats showed me in relationship to my research question. Check it again. Looks good. Finally, I need to put in some text for my discussion and conclusion. Back to typing. All right, I've typed up my discussion. I'd like to point out something to you now. I've typed in that discussion, but I haven't saved my results. You'll notice that there is a star next to the file name, indicating that I have not saved the version that I see in front of me. There's two ways to do your saving when you are working with an R Markdown document. One is simply to knit it. The saving occurs automatically during the knitting process. The other way, of course, is to go to File and to Save. Since I want to check how my document is doing, I'll knit it up one more time. At this point, since I think I've finished the document, I'd like to give it a very thorough check over. This check over could include such things as grammar and spelling. If you haven't noticed it before, there's a very helpful spell checker. You can get to it with the F7 help key. Let's say that I've done all those final checks. I'd like to see how the document will look in its very prettiest format. Let's ask to knit Word. The Word document has been produced and is sitting alongside of the R Markdown document in my Submit folder. I can either acknowledge that by pressing OK, or I can download the file and look at a copy of it right now. I'll just acknowledge the existence of it. So my work is all ready to turn in. Looking in my Submit folder, I see the original source document, the RMD. I see an HTML because I've been knitting the document to HTML several times, and I also see the Word document form. When you're doing a real data analysis report for another class, it's quite likely that people will want to see your Word document rather than your source document R Markdown or the HTML version. And so you can simply take the docx and you can download it from RStudio and then send it to whoever you like. That's the quick outline of the workflow involved in producing a data analysis report at this stage. As we go along in the course, we'll get a little more ambitious and larger scale in our data analysis. Thank you for listening.